Welcome back to talkSPORT Driving, the home of all things motorsport on talkSPORT. If you haven't already, please do like, share and subscribe. And today I'm joined for a MotoGP special by Stuart Barker. Now Stuart has written a brand new book called Marc Marquez, Everything or Nothing, which is available to buy from the 8th of May. It seems like a really interesting book. So Stuart, thanks so much for joining us. To get things started, could you tell our audience a little bit about the book and what they can maybe expect to read and learn from it?
Thanks, Bradley. You're welcome. Well, what they can expect is to learn about probably the most extraordinary career in MotoGP, in that Marc Marquez, his rise was so meteoric and his dominance was so great. I mean, he won 10 races in a row in only he won the World Championship as a rookie, which had never been done since, it's only been done once, Kenny Roberts in 1978. And then in his second year in 2014, he won 10 races in a row. And he just kept on dominating until Jerez in 2020. And he had the massive crash. His humerus was broken, but under normal circumstances, that would be a matter of weeks or a couple of months to heal. But he came back far too quickly, broke the plate, broke everything in it. It just ended up being 4 operations over years. And it looked like his career was over. And then as soon as he had a 4th operation in 2023, and I thought at that point, right, that it worked. It finally worked. They had to rotate his lower arm 34 degrees. It was out by 34 degrees. So, he was riding the bike like this. It was never going to work. But as soon as that operation was a success, I thought, okay, he can win this again, because he's the last of the aliens. We called Valentino Rossi, Jorge Lorenzo, Danny Pedrosa, Casey Stoner, the aliens, the talent level was so far beyond everyone else's. And with the rest all retiring, Marquez was the last left. And I just thought if he was fully fit, he could come back and do it again. But the big problem was the Honda he was on at the time had lost its way and was it was the worst bike in the field. So he needed to get himself onto a better bike as well as having healed the injury problems. And he ended up going to a satellite team last year, a satellite Ducati team, really the lowest in the pecking order. And his first time in a satellite team, just to prove he could still do it. And when he won last year for the first time since 2021, I think, I just thought, yeah, if he can get the factory Ducati, he can win the World Championship again. So it's already been called this year one of the greatest comebacks in sport and history, to be out really for 5 years and to come back and be as dominant as he's been this year. Bearing in mind the 2 mistakes from the last 3 races, they just needs to maybe settle down a little bit. But I mean, he's proven, beyond what any of us could have hoped, just how good he is when you've got the best rider on the best bike. So the tale of the book really is one from dominance to rock bottom to right back to the top again. And it's been a roller coaster. Just writing it.
And when you think of Marc Marquez, what attributes of his really spring to mind for you?
Natural ability and sheer determination. I mean, the broken arm itself, that's to belittle it. It was far worse than a broken arm. I mean, they couldn't even get screws in because the bone was so damaged from so many screws that they didn't have frames of reference to where to pin it back together. I mean, his arm was destroyed. So when he already had, multi-millions of pounds and had nothing left to prove, the desire to go through so much pain, so much physio, so much heartache, so many more operations to come back just to get that winning feeling again is absolutely remarkable. And I think there's only a fraction of human beings on earth that would, that have that much money, that would put that much effort in again for the sake of the sport and for the sake of winning.
And when you think of him as well, are there any particular races that really stick out in your mind that really highlight his ability?
Yeah, I'm not so great with dates. I think it was 2010, but when he was in the 125cc or Moto 3 as it now is, the championship was in the balance at the final round, and he crashed on the warm-up lap. So had to run back to the pits, get all the repairs on the bike done in minutes. Even other teams were helping, it was such a situation. And then he had to start from the back of the grid, overtook about 16 riders into the first corner, went on to win the race and the World Championship with it. And at that moment, I realised I was watching somebody extraordinarily special, given that we'd come off the back of Valentino Rossi was still king at that point. But that's the point I knew we had a once-in-a-generation talent there, Bradley.
And let's take it right back to the beginning. So before he joined, or before he moved into MotoGP, what was his background like?
Well, he'd written to the Three Kings, what we call over here the Three Wise Men. So in Spain, they celebrate Three Kings Night in early January. And when he was just about 4 years old, he wrote to the Three Kings asking for a motorbike because his dad marshalled at local dirt track races and stuff. So his dad was into bikes, and he got the little bike with the stabilizers on it, and he had a background in schoolboy motocross. And he was being interviewed on Spanish television when he was 10 years old, and even at that age he knew where he wanted to go. So he's never known a life without riding. His entire life, from not even 4 years old, just before 4 years old, has been learning how to slide and drift and control a motorcycle with his body. And when you've had that much experience, even by the time he was 15, he had 10 years experience. So it's a message to all kids out there: if you ever want to get to the top of any sport now, you've got to start pretty much as soon as you're born,
And when he made that step and moved into MotoGP, what was the reaction like at the time? Did people see him as a future world champion, or was he still someone that was very, very raw and had a lot to prove?
He did crash quite a lot in the beginning. So some would say that hasn't changed too much, but he was a bit of a slow learner. Not slow learner. The pace was always there, but his first couple of years in 125/Moto3, he needed to calm down. But crashing was part of the learning process. But once he'd won the Moto3 World Championship, or 125, then we knew the way he did it was so dominant by that point. And then when he moved up to Moto2 and then won that championship, then the anticipation for him to get on a MotoGP bike was massive. And from the very off, he was fast, But no one expected a rookie to win in that class with that level of competition at the time. Don't forget, you've got your Valentino Rossis and your Jorge Lorenzos and your Danny Pedrosas, who was his teammate. So it was just extraordinary to see, because, he's a once-in-a-generation talent. We just don't get to see this very often.
You mentioned there about him winning MotoGP in his rookie season. Just how big an achievement was it for this young guy from Spain to come in and get to the top so quickly and take over from someone like Valentino Rossi?
Well, such a big achievement that it had only been done once. You don't forget MotoGP or 500cc Grand Prix. It was then started in 1949, and only Kenny Roberts won it as a rookie in 1978. And Roberts changed the face of Grand Prix racing forever, made it far more scientific, far more professional, far more corporate, you could argue, changed the riding style, then had his own team. So he was on a par with Roberts, who's one of the greatest of all time. So that first year, I don't think the likes of Valentino Rossi and other guys could quite believe what they were. I mean, they knew he was a huge talent, having won in Moto3 and Moto2. But yeah, he took everyone by surprise with the sheer dominance of winning in your first. It shouldn't be possible, put it that way.
And his cornering technique as well is something that's earned quite a lot of interest over the last couple of years and during his career as well. Have you ever seen someone handle a motorbike just like Marc Marquez handles that one in MotoGP?
No, quite simply because no one ever had before. And I mean, Valentino Rossi changed the riding style when he came into MotoGP, and everyone had to adapt and learn to ride more like him. And if you look at pictures of Rossi pre and post Marquez, you see that even Rossi had to change his style. Marquez, I mean, everybody was getting their knees down, but Marquez started using, he wasn't the first to get his elbow down, but he had it down for longer and more pronouncedly than other riders through corners. And that effectively acted as a stabilizer. He's saved front end crashes that no one else on the planet could save. And even Rossi has admitted that. Even though he hates him. But it's became a kind of, it's become a kind of crutch for him. It's become another weapon in his arsenal, because he can save crashes that no one else can with this new riding technique. And again, we've had to see everyone else adapt and changing theirs to have any hope of staying with him.
And I was speaking to a couple of colleagues and people who have worked within MotoGP, and they say there's a vibe around Marquez that he either wins or crashes out. But his never say die attitude on his win or bust mentality when it comes to that, it surely paid dividends, the fact he's won 8 world titles.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, Marc's philosophy is to push the limits. The only way to find the limits is to go beyond them. So he tries to do that in practice and qualifying so that he doesn't lose points in a race. So he'll push to the limit and beyond, crash, and then realise, okay, that's as far as I can go, that's as far as I can lean, that's as hard as I can brake. But then try and then wind it back a little bit for the race. But as we've seen twice this year already, under no pressure at all from anybody, he still rides to the extreme. It's like he can't help himself. He's admitted himself. He's got 2 modes, on or off. And although in the past he has tried to force himself to ride smoother and slower, he loses concentration. He can't ride like that. It just doesn't work for him. So it's why I called the book Everything or Nothing, really, because that is his attitude. That's how he rides. That's his style.
You've touched on it already about his relationship with Valentino Rossi, and it's quite clear they do not like each other one bit at all. For our audience who aren't so aware about their relationship, can you make them aware and explain a little bit about why there is so much dislike between them?
Yeah, I mean, 2015 was arguably the most incredible season in MotoGP ever, the battle between Rossi and Marquez and Lorenzo, although the real bitterness was between Rossi and Marquez. I mean, Marquez had Rossi posters on his wall, all over his bedroom wall as a kid. He collected the little miniature bikes of all of Rossi's bikes. He was a huge, huge fan. And there's a famous picture when he first went into Moto3, 125s rather, had his photograph taken with Rossi. But I mean, Rossi was the king, and Marquez came into 2013 in MotoGP, and he was the guy who dethroned the king, and that didn't sit well with Rossi, particularly because he was chasing a 10th world title. And it really, 2015 was his last realistic chance to do it, and Marquez was the man that was denying him. So the needle really started when Rossi said in a press conference that Marquez was playing with the rest of the riders and trying to disrupt Rossi and try to stop him winning another title. And it just kind of shocked everybody. And Marquez went out in the race in Malaysia and thought, right, okay, if you think I've been obstructing you before, I'm going to show you what it's like when I really do. So the lead changed like 17 times in a few laps. It was absolutely crazy. And it was clear that Marquez was being a hindrance to Rossi. But then the 2 bikes kind of came together. It looked, to all intents and purposes, like Rossi had kicked Marquez off the bike. And it just created an absolute sensation. For the final round at Valencia, they had to bring in, police, extra security guards. They got rid of the press conference because they were afraid of Marquez fans and Rossi fans fighting. And this is something we've never seen in MotoGP, and we don't want to see in MotoGP, but it did make for just an incredible season. But having done the research and spoken to people for both books, the Rossi book and the Marquez book, I was a huge Rossi fan. And having looked at that year from both sides now, and especially since, because Rossi keeps bringing it up again and again and again, and even the boss, Carmelo Espeleta of MotoGP, of Dorna, has said, look, let it go now, Valentino. It's not doing any good now, nearly 10 years later, keeping on about it. So my opinion's kind of changed. I'm still a huge Rossi fan, respect him massively, but I think Marquez got the bad end of the stick with the press and was painted as the pantomime villain, when actually, when you read what's been said since, Marc always kept his mouth shut. Usually he didn't respond to Rossi's taunts, and I think now he's come out of it better. But I mean, because Rossi was the king and the whole fan base was Rossi, Marc was painted as a pantomime villain, and still very much is. But I think the way he's come back from injury this year, I think he's finally winning people's hearts over. Certainly mine. I've got nothing but admiration for him, for what he's done.
Do you think Rossi will ever be able to forgive him after everything you've said there, or is that a grudge that's going to live on for the rest of his life?
No, I can't see him ever forgiving that, especially because now, the last few years, it looked like Marquez would never reach Rossi's 9 titles. Marquez sits on 8. But the way he's riding this year with the best bike on the grid, and he's still got some years left in him, it looks very likely that he will overtake Rossi in the overall wins and the overall titles, which is only going to rankle Valentino even more. But look, he's got a beautiful girlfriend, 2 little kids, loads of money. I don't think he should be getting too upset.
I wasn't going to start off with this one, but my colleague John Jackson was speaking to Neil Hodgson out in Miami recently, and he said that Marquez is well ahead of Rossi when it comes to being considered as the greatest of all time. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, interesting you should mention Neil, because I interviewed him just last week for a magazine, and I interviewed him for the Rossi book, and he said at that time, yes, arguably Marquez's riding is better and makes him the greatest of all time. But what Neil said that was really interesting was how much Rossi had contributed to the sport and raised the profile of it and become a household name and made it available to so many more people. That's included in the mix, and that's what kind of he thought made him the greatest of all time. That, however, was a good 5 years ago. I wonder if Neil has... Well, I think Neil has kind of changed his mind now. He's Team Rossi all the way now, but Team Marquez all the way. But yeah, it's how much Valentino brought to the sport and moved it on. And in a way, Marquez, certainly in other countries, he's massively popular. But in the UK, he's always been a bit kind of... I don't think given a fair crack of the whip in the press because everything was about Rossi. And like I said, they wanted a pantomime villain.
And for a man who's written a book about both riders, if you had to choose one, who are you choosing?
Oh, choose one for what? The best rider, the greatest rider?
Greatest rider.
I'm going Marquez. Simply because Rossi, yes, he broke his leg, but he never had that period where he had to come back from such hideous injury. And then ride an inferior bike, arguably, the lowest one, and one of the smallest teams in the paddock, a satellite bike, and then work his way back up again. So I think Mark has just done that bit more. I'll get hated for this, but let me say I'm a huge Rossi fan as well, and you put me in a difficult position, Bradley.
Sorry about that, Stuart. I mean, we were touching on Mark's injuries and how close he was coming to having to give it all up because those injuries were just so severe. Is it a miracle that he's still able to ride a bike to this day? And when you look at this season now, he's still able to compete at the highest level?
It's a miracle of determination because, like I said earlier, when you've got that much luxury and comfort in your life and never have to work again, never have to worry about money, to want to do this as badly as he does. And I mean, he'd made a pact with his grandpa, who'd said to him after the third operation, his grandpa, Ramon, who was very close to him, passed away last year, sadly. He said, look, kid, you've got everything. You've got everything. Give it up. It's not worth all this pain. It's not worth what you're putting yourself through. And Mark made him a promise that if this fourth operation didn't work, then he would pack it in. And I'm just really sad that his grandpa passed away last year and hasn't been able to see not only what Mark's doing, but his younger brother Alex as well. Because the grandpa sat up all night into his 90s. No matter where the guys were racing in the world, he would sit up to watch it and set off fireworks when they won, and jump up and down on his sofa. And he was the first guy Mark would go and see whenever he got home from a race, or Alex, to let them know he was okay and how the race went. And just when you start seeing that side of Mark, that really personal side, you start realising, hang on, this isn't a pantomime villain at all. This is a really nice, family-orientated, decent bloke,
And the fact he's racing for Ducati this week, a legendary brand in the world of motorbikes, is that almost a match made in heaven? Absolutely,
because Ducati at the minute are dominating like we've never seen since the days of Honda. In fact, they've just equalled Honda's record from 97, 98. I mean, they one race they had 8, the whole top 8 bikes were Ducatis. And that happened this year with 6 of them. But to be on the, in the factory seat, it's the best bike that's ever been built, full stop. And, last year he was in the satellite version, which was almost every bit as good. But when you've got the extra resources of the factory team, the extra data technicians, just far more backup, it really is a match made in heaven. And the big question was how he would relate with Pecco Bagnaia, who's been the team's number one for the last few years and double world champion. And so far, Bagnaia hasn't beaten Marc once. Marc's crashed twice, obviously, and Bagnaia's got the points, but it's drawn it all so much closer together. Marc should be way out in front. He's thrown away 50 points unnecessarily, so he'd have at least a 50-point lead. As it is, he's 1 point behind his own brother, which is something we've never seen in MotoGP. And they share the same house. And, the two sausage dog pets, and yet they're at each other's throat on track. So I can't wait to see. I mean, they're very, very, very close. So I can't see them falling out. But after a few hard moves, it's MotoGP. You never know. One of them might be looking for another house.
How much of an interesting battle could that be? As you were saying, though, the two brothers going head to head for the title this year.
Yeah, it's just something we've never seen at this level, at any level in bike sports. So to have it at the very peak level is just fantastic. And I often wonder who his mum and dad are kind of shouting for in their heads when they're watching, because obviously their priority is just have a clean, safe race and get home okay. But it's fantastic to see. I mean, Marc has always said Alex was, as a youngster, was a better rider than him. But he's been a slow burner, Alex. He's won the Moto3 championship, Moto2 as well. And it's taken him just a few years to get, as it did in those championships, to just get to that level. And now that he's there, I mean, okay, in a straight fight, Marc still has the edge. But he himself has said Alex will definitely win some this year. So, I mean, it's fantastic in MotoGP having such a close battle, 1 point between the top two riders. But for them to be brothers who live in the same house is just ridiculous. It's unheard of. I mean, you would laugh at it in a Hollywood movie. And it's so unlikely.
And you were talking about Hollywood movies there. If Marc was to win it this year, considering everything he's gone through, all those injuries, the fact that we thought at one point we might not ever see him on a bike again, would it be one of the greatest comebacks in sporting history if he was to go on and lift the title this season for Ducati?
Well, I'm biased, but I would say definitely yes, because to be out from the top level for about 5 years, certainly I checked through all the previous winners, and it's never been done before. People have come back and won titles after 1 or 2 dodgy years, but never 5 years later, and never recuperating from such a hideous career-threatening injury. So for me, it would probably be the greatest achievement in motorcycle racing ever, and that's a huge claim. That's a ridiculous claim, but it certainly would be a contender, yeah.
And lastly, I really, really appreciate your time and for joining us today, and such an educational chat that we've had around such a legendary rider. When it comes for Marc but he does retire, what do you think his legacy will be in the sport?
Well, I mean, there's a good few years yet. He's still not that old, and if he equals Rossi's title this year, then there's only one thing he's going to aim for next year, isn't there? He's also now just behind. He's the third most winningest, horrible expression, rider behind Giacomo Agostini and Rossi himself in terms of individual race wins. He just passed Angel Nieto the other week, so he will simply go down as, if not one of the greatest, then the greatest of all time. And I mean, like I say, both him and Rossi are generational talents. So we've yet to see, maybe, there's been a lot of noise made about Pedro Acosta, about David Alonso, but they've yet to really establish themselves in the top class like Marquez has done. And yet you'd be hard pushed to argue that there's ever been a better motorcycle racer than Marc Marquez.
Well, Stuart, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you on talkSPORT Driving, and your book, Marc Marquez, Everything or Nothing, is available to purchase from the 8th of May.